She remembered the sound of the house more than the faces, because silence had weight in that place, and every step echoed like a reminder that she did not belong there in the way daughters were supposed to belong. She was born into a family that counted value and usefulness and measured love in returns. And from childhood, she learned that affection was something borrowed, never owned. Her mother spoke to her with instructions, not warmth. Her father looked at her with expectations, not pride, and every birthday passed like a regular day, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and quietly forgotten. She grew up believing that survival was the same thing as living, and that gratitude was the price she paid for existing in their world. When she became older, responsibility was placed on her shoulders without question. She cooked, she cleaned, she worked, she sacrificed while her siblings chased dreams and freedom. She was told to be patient, to wait her turn, to understand that life was unfair, and that this was just how things were meant to be. She listened because she had no choice, but listening slowly became obedience, and obedience became invisibility, and invisibility became her identity. Yet inside her, there was a constant ache, a quiet voice asking why love always felt like something she had to earn, and why loyalty only moved in one direction. As the years passed, she watched her parents grow older, and with age came entitlement masked as dependence. They relied on her for everything, while reminding her that she owed them everything. And when she began working and saving for her own future, they spoke of family duty and sacrifice and tradition until her savings stopped feeling like her own, and more like a shared resource that everyone had a claim to except her. And the moment she hesitated, the guilt was immediate and crushing, because she had been trained to feel wrong for wanting anything for herself. The betrayal did not arrive loudly. It came quietly disguised as trust and need and family urgency when her daughter, the one person she believed would understand, came to her with excitement and desperation, mixed together, speaking of dreams of travel, of finding herself, of seeing the world beyond small routines. She listened with a mother's heart full of pride and fear, because she knew what it meant to want more from life. She remembered that hunger too well, and when her daughter asked for help, asked to borrow money just for a while, just enough, she agreed without asking questions, because love had always meant giving until there was nothing left, and it never crossed her mind that this time would be different. Days later, she opened the refrigerator after a long shift, expecting the familiar comfort of leftovers, only to find emptiness, shelves bare, air-cold silence screaming, and in that moment the weight of years collapsed onto her chest because she understood immediately what had happened. Her pension, the money she had saved for survival, for dignity, for old age, was gone, taken without warning, without consent, and spent on a journey she was not invited to be part of. And the shock was not the loss of money, but the realization that even her sacrifice had been taken for granted, that even her future had been considered optional. And as she stood there staring into the empty fridge, she felt something inside her break. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely, the kind of breaking that does not bleed, but changes everything. The kind that leaves clarity behind instead of pain. And for the first time, she did not cry. She did not scream. She did not call anyone. She simply closed the door and sat down in the quiet, understanding that the role she had played her entire life had finally consumed her, and that if she did not choose herself now, there would be nothing left of her to save. That night, she did not sleep. She replayed every moment, every sacrifice, every time she said yes. When she wanted to say no, every time she believed that love meant endurance and loyalty meant silence. And as the hours passed, something unfamiliar settled in her chest. A calm, steady resolve. She realized that her life had been shaped by fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of judgment, fear of being called selfish. But the truth was, she had already been abandoned emotionally long before, and judged regardless of her actions, and labeled selfish, even when she gave everything. And with that realization came freedom. She stood up before sunrise, packed only what she needed, and left the house without explanations, because explanations had never protected her Before she chose a different path, not driven by revenge, but by survival, by the understanding that dignity was not something others granted. It was something she had to claim herself. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. And as the city lights faded behind her, she felt lighter, not because her pain disappeared, but because she stopped carrying everyone else's weight. And this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a reckoning, a quiet, powerful transformation that would challenge every person who had mistaken her kindness for weakness and her silence for consent. She did not disappear from the world. The morning she left, she simply stepped into a version of it that no longer demanded her silence. The city welcomed her without promises, without judgment, without history, and for the first time in her life, she was just a woman, not a role, not a sacrifice, not a solution to everyone else's problems. She rented a small room, nothing fancy, nothing permanent, but it was hers. And that alone felt like a victory every night. She lay on the bed listening to unfamiliar sounds, traffic voices, distant sirens, and instead of fear, she felt relief because no one was waiting to take something from her. She found work that paid little but respected her time. And though her body was tired, her spirit felt awake. She carried pain with her, always. But it no longer controlled her steps. She thought about her daughter. Often, not with anger, but with a quiet ache, wondering where she had gone, what she was seeing, whether she ever thought about the empty refrigerator, or the woman standing in front of it realizing she had been erased. And some nights, the memories returned heavy, and loud moments of laughter, moments of giving moments, when she chose love over logic and loyalty over self-preservation. And when those memories came, she let them pass. She did not chase them. She did not fight them. She simply acknowledged that they existed, and that they no longer defined her. Weeks turned into months, and slowly she rebuilt herself piece by piece, learning how to make decisions without guilt, how to rest without apology, how to exist without permission. She attended community meetings, listened to stories from people who had also been used, discarded, overlooked. And in those shared experiences, she found strength. She realized her pain was not unique, but her survival was. And that realization gave her purpose. She began speaking softly at first, sharing her story not as a victim but as a witness to what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness. People listened not because she demanded attention, but because her truth carried weight, and her voice, steady and calm, held a power she never knew she possessed. She was no longer invisible. She was present, grounded, real. And every time she spoke, she felt years of silence leave her body. She did not seek revenge. She did not seek validation. She sought understanding, and in doing so, she found healing. Then one evening, her phone rang, a number she had not saved, but recognized immediately. The voice on the other end was fragile, unfamiliar, trembling with regret. Her daughter spoke of confusion, of mistakes, of running away from responsibility and reality. She spoke of fear and loneliness, and the realization that freedom without accountability is just another kind of emptiness. She apologized, not with excuses, but with tears and silence. And the mother listened quietly, every word, landing deep but not breaking her this time. Because she had changed, she was no longer the woman who absorbed pain to keep peace. She was someone who understood boundaries. And when her daughter asked to come home, the question echoed heavy between them. Because home was no longer a place, it was a choice. And for the first time, she chose honesty over habit. She said, not yet. She said, healing takes time, and trust takes longer. And though the words hurt, they were necessary because love without truth had already cost her too much. After that call, she sat alone, reflecting not on what she lost, but on what she gained: clarity, strength. Turning point. She began planning for her future again, slowly, cautiously investing not just money, but belief into herself. She dreamed of starting something meaningful, something that could turn her pain into purpose, something that would give voice to women like her, who had been silenced by duty and expectation and fear. She did not know how or when, but she knew why, and that was enough to keep going, because this journey was no longer about escape. It was about becoming. She moved forward with intention now, no longer drifting through days, but shaping them with care and purpose. Each morning began with quiet discipline and reflection, not because life demanded it, but because she finally respected herself enough to demand structure and peace. She began saving again slowly, cautiously, every dollar carrying meaning, not obligation. She volunteered at local centers, listening to stories that mirrored her own women, who gave until empty women who were praised for endurance, but never protected for humanity. And in their eyes, she saw her past, and in her voice, they heard possibility. She did not speak loudly. She did not preach. She simply told the truth, and the truth carried weight, because it was lived, earned, survived. And over time, people began seeking her out, not for pity, but for guidance, for strength, for reassurance that choosing yourself does not make you cruel. It makes you whole. And with every conversation, she felt a new chapter writing itself not in pain, but in power. She understood now that suffering does not disappear when ignored. It transforms when confronted, and she had finally confronted hers. Her daughter returned months later, not dramatically, not expecting forgiveness, but carrying humility and exhaustion. The kind that comes from learning lessons the hard way. And when they met, there were no accusations, no shouting, only long silence filled with things that could not be undone, but could still be acknowledged. Her daughter spoke of regret, of guilt, of seeing the world without understanding the cost of escape. And the mother listened not as someone seeking apology, but as someone measuring truth. And when she saw sincerity, she offered something stronger than forgiveness. She offered boundaries. She welcomed her presence, but not her entitlement. She offered love, but not sacrifice. And for the first time, their relationship existed without imbalance, without debt, without silent expectations. And though it was uncomfortable at times, it was honest. And honesty felt like progress. And healing did not rush them. It walked slowly, carefully, making sure both were strong enough to carry it. As her confidence grew, so did her vision. She began organizing small gatherings, workshops, safe spaces where stories were shared without shame, where women spoke of betrayal, exhaustion, resilience, and rebirth. And those spaces grew because truth attracts those who are ready to face it. She became a voice, not because she sought recognition, but because recognition found her. And with every story shared, she felt years of invisibility dissolve. She was no longer defined by what was taken from her, but by what she built from it. And when challenges arose, doubts, financial struggles, moments of fear, she did not retreat. She adapted because resilience had become her language and purpose, her compass. And she realized something profound, that survival had been her past, but creation was her future. One evening alone, she reflected on the woman she used to be, the one who believed love required suffering, the one who confused loyalty with silence. And she felt compassion, not regret, because every version of herself had carried her here. And as she stood in that understanding, she knew the final test was not success or recognition, but peace. And peace arrived quietly, without ceremony, without validation. It settled in her chest like certainty, and she smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer afraid of imperfection. She had reclaimed her voice, her boundaries, her dignity, and her story was no longer something that happened to her. It was something she owned, shaped, and shared. And this ownership marked the final transformation, not from victim to survivor, but from survivor to leader. She never planned to become a symbol or a voice for others. It happened naturally, the way rivers carve paths without asking permission. The spaces she created grew larger, not in size, but in impact. Women arrived carrying years of silence in their eyes, stories heavy with sacrifice and neglect. And when they spoke, they did not speak as victims, they spoke as survivors, recognizing themselves in her calm strength and unwavering honesty. She reminded them that love should not require self-erasure, and family should not demand suffering, as proof of loyalty, and slowly something shifted not just in those rooms, but within her as well. She no longer questioned her worth or replayed the past searching for mistakes, because she understood now that endurance was never her flaw. It was her foundation, and what once drained her now fueled her purpose. She stood firmly in who she had become, unafraid of judgment, unburdened by guilt, unchained from expectations that never served her. Her daughter remained in her life, not as a dependent, not as a center, but as an equal, learning, rebuilding, growing alongside her. And though the scars remained, they no longer controlled the narrative. Trust was rebuilt slowly, carefully, with honesty, replacing obligation and respect, replacing entitlement. And through that process, they both learned that forgiveness is not forgetting, and love is not returning to who you were. It is meeting again as who you have become. And in that balance, they found peace, not perfect, not effortless, but real and sustainable, something neither of them had known before. The world outside continued as it always had, unfair, demanding, unpredictable, but she no longer felt threatened by it, because she had faced the hardest truth already, the truth that the greatest loss is losing yourself while trying to save others. And once that lesson is learned, nothing can take your power again. She invested in herself, fully building security, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and with every step forward, she felt lighter, stronger, clearer. She no longer needed approval or validation, because her life finally reflected her values, and her days were no longer spent surviving someone else's expectations. They were spent creating meaning on her own terms. One quiet evening, as the sun faded and the city softened into silence, she sat alone, reflecting on the journey, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that revealed her strength. Gratitude for the betrayal that forced her awakening. Gratitude for the silence that taught her to speak. And in that stillness, she understood that her story was never about loss. It was about returning to herself, reclaiming her voice, honoring her worth, and choosing dignity over fear. And as she breathed in that truth, she smiled, knowing that her story would travel far beyond her voice, touching lives she would never meet, reminding them that kindness is powerful, but boundaries are sacred, and that choosing yourself is not abandonment. It is survival. And sometimes survival is the bravest act of love there is.